Welcome to the Risk Wheelhouse, the podcast where we navigate the ever-changing seas of risk management and technology. Join your hosts, Ori Wellington and Sam Jones, as they steer you through the latest trends, insights, and strategies shaping the future of integrated risk management. Ready to chart a course towards success? Hop aboard and let's set sail into today's deep dive.
So here's the thing about enterprise risk management tools. They're typically bought for one reason, usually compliance, maybe reporting completeness, to satisfy an audit requirement or just to get through the annual risk process. But if you're a senior leader, you know the truth. These investments, they're ultimately judged by something completely different. Their direct measurable impact on executive and board decisions. That really is the new market standard for success. The measure of value has structurally shifted from the quality of your documentation to the quality of your decisions. Welcome to the Deep Dive, the executive audio series from Wheelhouse Advisors, where we translate these market shifts and vendor strategies into, practical, defensible implications for risk leaders. Today, we are undertaking a critical deep dive into the 2025 IRM Navigator Vendor Compass for Enterprise Risk Management, or ERM. The ERM market is going through a pretty significant reorganization, really driven by accelerating risk volatility. Over the next half hour or so, you are going to learn 3 essential things that will directly influence your program road mapping for 2025 and beyond. First, we'll detail the 2 non-negotiable dimensions, solution coverage and level of integration that really define leadership in ERM platforms. And we'll talk about what the 3 vendor tiers, Integrators, Accelerators, and pace setters imply for your organization's maturity. Second, we're going to provide a really practical breakdown of the 4 core ERM solution areas, everything from board risk oversight to enterprise legal risk that boards and executives must rigorously evaluate when they're selecting technology. And finally, we will leave you with a 4-step playbook for using this vendor compass research to accelerate your ERM technology selection and your program road mapping in the next 30 to 90 days. Okay, so let's unpack this central idea. We all talk about enterprise risk management, but it feels like the modern definition is shifting dramatically. It's less about a static list, a risk register, and more about real-time, evidence-based decision support. How should executives today really define modern ERM, especially in the context of this broader integrated risk management world?
That's the perfect place to start. Modern ERM, in that integrated ecosystem, is really the strategic decision backbone of IRM. We position it as decision support and oversight, but at the enterprise scale. So you need to think of it not as a static repository, but more like the central nervous system that ensures your strategic execution is actually risk-adjusted.
So it's the link.
It's the mechanism. It links your performance targets, your resilience expectations, your assurance confidence, and compliance exposure.
Yeah.
It links all of that into a unified, accountable set of leadership decisions. And crucially, this system has to operate at the highest strategic level. Its job is to deliver discipline. It moves ERM beyond just cataloging risks and pushes it toward, a scenario-first governance of all that enterprise uncertainty.
And when you say decision support, you mean more than just a dashboard, right?
Oh, much more. It means providing the actual evidence and the framework you need to make a definitive choice, and then critically, having the traceability to prove why that choice was made.
That shift from documentation to decision discipline, that really captures the pressure that risk leaders are under. So if ERM tools have historically been focused on that annual compliance report, what are the key forces driving this evolution right now? Why does this platform choice matter more today than ever?
The pressures are, they're significant, and they're compounding. And they are transforming ERM from what was a regulatory necessity into a real strategic differentiator. The first force is just the sheer acceleration of risk cycles. We are long past the era where ERM could comfortably rely on an annual cycle.
Right, the world moves too fast for that.
Exactly. Risks, whether they're, tech dependencies, geopolitical instability, or climate shocks in the supply chain, they converge and accelerate so much faster now. And this demands a decision cadence built on real-time signal analysis, on scenario discipline, and on threshold-based escalation.
So if your process takes 6 months,
then the risk has already happened. You're reporting on history, not managing the future.
Yeah. And that second pressure point, that flows directly from the C-suite and the board, doesn't it? Their expectations have changed a lot.
Absolutely. Board decision expectations have fundamentally matured. Boards and executives now expect ERM to answer 3 critical questions with verifiable integrated evidence and often on very short notice.
Okay, what are those 3 questions?
1, what exactly could change the trajectory of our enterprise objectives? 2, how quickly could this happen and how fast would we need to respond? And 3, and this is really the test of operational readiness, what management actions are pre-authorized when specific quantified risk thresholds are breached?
So not just what's the risk, but what do we do right now?
Precisely. And if your ERM program can't provide evidence-backed answers to those 3 questions, grounded in data from across the business, it's going to struggle for strategic credibility.
You mentioned credibility. The report highlights 2 specific tests that a modern ERM program has to pass. Let's dig into those. Appetite operationalization and integration.
Right. Credibility test 1 is all about appetite operationalization. Risk appetite statements have, traditionally existed as these broad, qualitative governance artifacts. They were documents to satisfy an auditor.
Vague statements like, we have a low appetite for reputational risk.
Exactly, which is functionally useless. Now, those statements must be translated into quantified, machine-readable thresholds, clear escalation rules, and detailed scenario-based decision playbooks. Just think about the practical side of that. If your appetite statement says you have a moderate appetite for technology disruption, what does a manager on the ground do with that? Nothing.
Right.
A successful ERM platform takes that statement and translates it into something like this. If the failure of a Tier 1 application affects more than 20% of customer transactions for longer than 4 hours, the incident owner is immediately authorized to invoke the Tier 3 recovery scenario, and the CEO must be notified within 30 minutes.
That's the difference between governance rhetoric and measurable action.
That's the entire test. High-performing programs use appetite not just to limit the downside, but to actively steer growth and investment trade-offs.
And that brings us to the second test, which seems to be about tackling silos.
Credibility test 2 is simply integration. ERM cannot afford to be this detached, abstract, top-of-house model. For the outputs you present to the board to be credible, ERM must unify signals from operational reality.
So it has to pull in data from other risk functions.
It has to. It needs to integrate real-time operational disruption signals from ORM, validated tech exposure signals from TRM, and the control evidence and assurance findings from your GRC function. This entire verified evidence chain has to inform those high-level strategic decisions.
Yeah, if it doesn't.
If your ERM platform operates in a silo, unconnected to the underlying facts of the business, its outputs are going to be dismissed. And rightly so. They'll just be seen as theoretical.
So before we get into the vendor compass itself, we need to establish the lens that Wheelhouse Advisors uses for all this, the IRM Navigator Model. It's a framework that helps make sense of a pretty fragmented market. For executives who need a quick primer, how does this model organize enterprise risk?
We created the IRM Navigator Model to provide a clear, unified structure. It organizes the entire risk ecosystem around 4 core enterprise outcomes. We call them PRAC.
PRAC.
Performance, resilience, assurance, and compliance. These are really the 4 non-negotiable objectives of any modern enterprise. And importantly, they aren't abstract goals. They're activated through 4 specific integration points in the business: goals, processes, assets, and policies.
So the idea is to embed risk management where work actually happens.
Exactly. It ensures risk management is where decisions are made, where work is executed, and where value is created. For example, if you're managing risks around your IT stack, that's at the assets integration point. If you manage compliance obligations, that's at the policies integration point.
Okay, so if IRM is about unifying those PRAC outcomes across those 4 points, where does enterprise risk management, ERM, actually sit in that structure, and why is its placement so important?
ERM is the anchor at the goals integration point.
Yeah.
This is the highest strategic layer of the model.
The top of the pyramid.
Right. And it's significant because the goals integration point represents the strategic engine of the enterprise. So ERM's primary job is converting strategic ambition, the company's vision and objectives, and the board-approved risk appetite into definitive decision boundaries and established executive routines. By sitting at that goals layer, ERM defines the enterprise direction. It sets the appetite boundaries, it frames the most consequential scenarios, and it ensures that all the technical and operational signals flowing up from the other segments, processes, assets, policies are all filtered, prioritized, and converted into timely executive and board actions.
It provides the context for all that data.
It's the context engine.
Let's make that more concrete. If ERM is the strategic engine, what kind of fuel does it consume, and what refined output does it produce for the board?
Great question. The inputs come from several critical sources. First and most important are the enterprise objectives and the risk appetite itself, which set the direction. Then it has to consume verified evidence from the other IRM domains.
So ORM, TRM, and GRC.
Correct. ORM provides event, loss, and control effectiveness data. TRM provides exposure, dependency, and vulnerability signals from your tech assets. And GRC provides the essential assurance evidence, control testing results, and disclosure support.
And the outputs.
The outputs are designed explicitly for the board and the C-suite. They include board-grade risk posture dashboards that are tied directly to objectives, a curated scenario library with owners and triggers, explicit decision traceability for material risk acceptance, and critically unified executive reporting that translates all those cross-domain signals into quantifiable consequences.
So concise, strategic, and defensible.
It has to be all three.
So by operating at that goals integration point, ERM is directly responsible for activating those PRC outcomes. How does that translate into practical business language for a listener who isn't a full-time risk professional?
It connects those 4 dots for the entire organization. ERM drives better performance by ensuring your strategy is continually risk-adjusted against those tolerance boundaries. It strengthens resilience by formally defining the enterprise tolerances for disruption and ensuring escalation discipline is standardized. It enables assurance by building board confidence through transparent decision traceability and verifying control effectiveness. And finally, it informs compliance when legal and regulatory exposure rises to a material level, requiring explicit strategic decisions.
And without ERM at that goals layer.
Without ERM anchoring the goals layer, those 4 objectives just operate independently. And that leads to the exact fragmentation that integrated risk management is designed to solve.
This context brings us to the core of the research, the vendor compass itself. This is the strategic guidance for platform selection. So here's where it gets really important. Let's talk about how the compass evaluates the market. It uses 2 critical dimensions. We'll start with the vertical axis, solution coverage.
Okay. Solution coverage is an objective assessment of the breadth and the depth of a vendor's capabilities across the 4 core ERM solution areas we analyze: board risk oversight, corporate governance, strategic and emerging risk, and enterprise legal risk.
Now, solution coverage can sound a bit like a feature checklist, but I know the compass focuses much more on functional maturity than just counting features. What are the key elements you're really emphasizing when you assess this dimension?
That's a really important distinction. We are not just checking if a vendor has a button labeled risk register. We are checking if they support the decision cadence. The decision cadence, the rhythm and routine of how decisions are made. We emphasize core functions like rigorous scenario modeling discipline, the real operationalization of risk appetite, translating it into those measurable thresholds, and the ability to produce defensible, auditable board reporting.
So the goal of this axis is to measure how completely a platform supports that top-level decision-making.
That's it. How well does it support the enterprise decision layer at the goals integration point? If the functionality doesn't facilitate an executive decision or create an audit artifact, it doesn't score highly here.
Okay, now let's move to dimension 2, the horizontal axis. Level of integration. Given everything we've said about the pressures on ERM, this dimension feels like the ultimate test of a vendor's readiness for the future.
It is absolutely foundational. Level of integration defines a vendor's proven ability to extend ERM into that broader IRM ecosystem. And we measure this by their capacity to consume verified cross-domain signals from ORM, TRM, and GRC, and then translate them into decision-grade ERM outputs.
Like what kind of outputs?
Things like automatically calculated thresholds, predefined escalation paths, unified board reporting that incorporates evidence from other systems without manual rework. And critically, we're looking beyond just simple data sharing. Integration now requires evidence reuse.
Evidence reuse. What do you mean by that?
It means the source data has to retain its context and its assurance confidence as it moves up the stack. A strong integration score means the platform can effectively support a unified IRM architecture and eliminate all that redundant manual reporting across risk domains. The proof is in the practical, repeatable mechanisms for taking operational or technology data and turning it into a strategic, auditable conversation for the board.
Understanding those 2 dimensions really helps us interpret the 3 vendor tiers the compass uses. You're clear that it's not a ranking, but more of a strategic fit analysis. Could you explain those tiers, integrators, accelerators, and pace setters, and what they imply for a buyer's maturity stage?
Absolutely. The tiers provide strategic guidance based on a buyer's specific needs and where they are on that IRM Navigator curve. First, you have the integrators. These include mature platforms like Archer and Diligent. These platforms unify broad, deep ERM functionality with the strongest, most proven IRM integration capabilities.
So who are they for?
They're typically the best fit for large, complex organizations that are already operating at the extended stage of maturity. This means they have multiple risk domains already established, and cross-domain evidence reuse and consistent enterprise decision routines are non-negotiable expectations from their board and regulators. They offer the deepest scalability.
Okay, what's next?
Next, we have the accelerators. This cluster includes vendors like ServiceNow, Riskonnect, and IBM OpenPages. They deliver substantial depth and innovation, often focusing on advanced workflow or specific cutting-edge areas within ERM.
And they help organizations move up that maturity curve.
Exactly. They help enterprises progress strongly from what we call coordinated to embedded maturity. The thing for buyers to understand here is that while accelerators offer strong core capability, getting to full operationalization of the decision outputs, especially complex custom integrations, often requires some deliberate configuration and architecture design from the buyer. They provide the tools for integration, but the buyer has to bring the architectural discipline.
And the third tier.
Finally, the pace setters. Think of vendors like LogicGate, Contracts, and Workiva. These vendors offer highly targeted strengths, usually for very focused use cases or organizations running earlier stage programs, maybe at the foundational to coordinated stages.
So speed to value.
Right. They provide fast, visible value and an excellent user experience for specific tasks. But if a buyer expects enterprise-level integration across all 4 ERM solution areas at once, they must approach the implementation with a very deliberate design strategy to ensure that clear, open paths for future integration exist. They excel at speed and defined workflows, but often for a narrower scope.
That's a crucial distinction for anyone in procurement. So how should a chief risk officer or a general counsel actually read the vendor compass graphic when they see a vendor's placement? What should they infer from that?
You should infer strategy, not just feature completeness. The placement is strategic guidance. When you look at it, you have to ask yourself, is this platform addressing my most urgent pain point? Buyers should infer that vendors placed higher on that level of integration access have practical, repeatable, tested mechanisms for ingesting cross-domain evidence and routing it immediately into board-level decision reports. And that capability directly reduces the time to evidence and the time to decision.
So the key takeaway is what?
The core message of the report is this. The most effective ERM selections will strengthen your board-level decision routines, that's the solution coverage axis, while simultaneously reinforcing a unified IRM evidence model. That's the level of integration axis. You have to ensure your platform does both, or you're just building another strategic silo at the top of the house.
Let's focus now on the 4 critical solution areas that really define the scope of the modern ERM segment. These are the functional building blocks that executives need, and they're the basis of that solution coverage evaluation. Let's start with board risk oversight. What does platform support for this area actually entail, and why is this a non-negotiable for modern risk programs?
Board risk oversight is the platform capability that provides that executive and board-level visibility into your risk posture. It's all about decision traceability and clarity. This area includes features like dedicated board-grade dashboards, customizable risk appetite and threshold views, and formalized automated escalation workflows. And, critically, it's the mechanism for translating complex cross-domain signals, like a combination of high vulnerability findings from TRM and critical process dependencies from ORM, into a concise, high-impact story for non-technical stakeholders.
It lets the CRO tell a coherent story backed by data.
Without spending weeks synthesizing reports, yes. A high-maturity platform provides that evidence with push-button efficiency. A low-maturity platform forces the CRO's team to spend 80% of their time on manual work.
And why does having robust platform support here matter so much?
It matters because it directly supports the board's fiduciary responsibility and ensures clear follow-through on decisions. The outcomes we look for are a reduction in time to escalate material breaches, consistency in board reporting cadence, and the guaranteed reuse of verified assurance evidence to back up those board narratives.
Okay, next up is corporate governance. How does an ERM platform support robust governance structures?
Corporate governance capabilities ensure that ERM practices align precisely with enterprise expectations, particularly around accountability and delegated authority. So platform capabilities here include defining committee structures and charters, managing delegated authorities for risk acceptance, linking policies to material decisions, and providing mechanisms for clear accountabilities.
The goal is an audit trail.
The ultimate goal is creating auditable artifacts for all oversight responsibilities. For instance, if the board approves a new risk acceptance, the platform should automatically generate the auditable record showing who was responsible, which committee approved it, and what compensating controls were put in place, all linked to the risk appetite.
And the measurable benefits of getting that right inside the system.
You see substantial improvements in clarity, consistency, and velocity. The outcome signals are things like clear decision rights, a reduction in duplicate reporting, more timely committee materials, and a stronger link between risk oversight and strategic execution. It prevents risk analysis from existing in a vacuum.
Moving to the more forward-looking capabilities, let's talk about strategic and emerging risk. This is where the platform has to demonstrate its predictive value, often against risks that don't have a lot of historical data.
This is probably the most dynamic area right now. This capability is about proactively identifying risks that could fundamentally threaten enterprise objectives. Things like geopolitical shifts, AI regulation, or rapid tech obsolescence, and then translating that ambiguity into a scenario posture and defined actions.
So it's more than just a list of potential risks.
Much more. A high-maturity system doesn't just list geopolitical risk. It provides a portfolio of scenarios. Scenario A, localized supply chain shock. Scenario B, global sanctions escalation. And each one is tied to specific KRIs, named owners, pre-authorized actions, and a financial impact analysis.
And why is strong platform support for this so vital for executives today?
Because it forces executive focus onto the consequential uncertainties that could radically shift the value of the enterprise, rather than just managing long lists of historical risks. This capability requires the platform to facilitate frequent scenario refreshes, align them with current strategy, and critically, assign clear owners and defined escalation triggers for every top scenario.
Otherwise, they just become shelfware.
Expensive documents that collect dust until a crisis hits.
Exactly. Finally, the fourth area, enterprise legal risk. This has often been a siloed function. The Vendor Compass explicitly integrates it into ERM. What does this cover, and why is that integration so critical now?
Are you ready to see risk management in action? At Wheelhouse Advisors, we've launched a new YouTube channel dedicated to integrated risk management. You'll find quick explainers, insights from our IRM Navigator research reports, highlights from the Risk Journal, and conversations from the Risk Wheelhouse podcast. We're covering the topics that matter most to executives and risk leaders, from AI governance and cyber insurance to operational resilience and regulatory change. Every video is designed to help you anticipate risks, adapt with confidence, and build resilience in a digital-first world. In our first video, we explain how ISO 42001, the EU AI Act, and the NIST AI Risk Management Framework can work together as a unified playbook for AI risk. Subscribe today at youtube.com/@wheelhouseadv and get the latest insights delivered directly to you. That's youtube.com/@wheelhouseadv. Subscribe now and stay ahead of the risks that matter most.
Enterprise legal risk is about managing material legal exposures, significant contract obligations, and litigation-related risks that could rise to enterprise materiality and influence strategic outcomes or disclosures. This requires platforms to support enterprise-level legal risk taxonomies, provide visibility into legal matters where appropriate, and ensure decision traceability for risk acceptance when legal exposure shapes strategy.
So it connects the legal world to the strategic world.
It has to. Think about managing third-party risks after an M&A deal. A strong ERM platform integrates data from contract lifecycle management, identifies critical clauses like termination rights or indemnities, and translates them into quantifiable risk signals that feed the strategic risk dashboard.
And what's the measurable consequence of getting that integration right?
The consequence is enhanced defensibility and faster action. Legal defensibility is a first-class requirement now. By integrating enterprise legal risk, organizations gain better visibility into material legal exposures, reduce the time it takes to surface legal issues to leadership, and ultimately achieve greater defensibility in their board reporting and disclosures. The ERM system has to support this continuous, traceable defensibility trail. If we look at buyer behavior over the last year, what's really fascinating is that the evidence shows these clear, irreversible structural shifts in demand. And they validate the need for this decision-centric approach. We see 4 major trends redefining what success looks like.
Let's start with that central idea again, the shift from passive reporting to active management.
Exactly. The first trend is a very pronounced, aggressive focus on decision cadence over documentation. This is moving beyond just a concept. Buyers are actively demanding systems that institutionalize these continuous decision routines.
So the metrics for success are changing.
Completely. They've shifted away from the volume of documents produced toward operational decision metrics, things like time to decision, time to escalate a material breach, and quantifying loss avoidance linked to timely intervention. If the platform doesn't make decision-making faster and more accountable, it fails to deliver value.
That operational speed means you can't rely on annual static models, which brings us to the second trend around scenario analysis.
That's right. Scenario discipline is now a board routine. Strategic volatility no longer allows for scenarios to be an annual exercise you file away. Boards now expect a dynamic scenario portfolio.
Covering things like cyber-physical risks or geopolitical disruption.
Yes, complex, converging risks. And they expect that portfolio to be refreshed, reused, and actively stress-tested as a decision instrument. This means the platform has to facilitate linkage. Scenarios have to stress strategic assumptions and link potential outcomes directly to actionable thresholds and mitigation trade-offs. It forces accountability.
The third trend is about integration, and you mentioned evidence reuse earlier. Can you elaborate on why that's become a non-negotiable?
Integration as evidence reuse is the third structural shift, and it's because the consequences of fragmentation are so catastrophic. Demand has moved past simple APIs. Buyers require evidence reuse because ERM must absorb verified, assured operational and technology signals and translate them into unified decisioning that is both auditable and defensible. The system must know the provenance of the data.
And we've seen some very painful, high-profile examples of this recently.
We have. The July 2024 CrowdStrike-related outage wasn't just a tech incident. It was an acute failure of TRM that cascaded instantly into operational disruption globally. Similarly, the 2024 Change Healthcare cyber attack showed in excruciating detail how a tech incident becomes an operational, financial, and continuity event, immediately elevating legal and disclosure issues.
So these incidents were a stark reminder that fragmented risk data is a profound liability.
It's no longer just an inefficiency. ERM platforms must provide that unified view that connects the TRM signal, which is vulnerability, with the ORM signal, which is impact, to assess the comprehensive enterprise-level impact and formulate a single decision posture for the board.
So the pressure is on vendors to prove they can actually synthesize that data at the speed of a crisis.
Absolutely. The age of building a custom data lake to manually link risk systems is ending. And this focus on data velocity brings us to the final critical trend: AI with assurance-grade caution. AI is being adopted rapidly in ERM, mainly for sensing, simulation, and accelerating scenario refreshes and signal triage. But the market is approaching this with maturity. Buyers are demanding auditable controls, clear provenance for AI-generated insights, and measurable performance improvements.
Proof over promises.
Exactly, proof over promises. Trustworthy AI support requires transparent evidence about the model and training data, and repeatable outcomes that ensure accountability remains with human decision-makers. The AI can't operate in a governance black box.
We've established what best-in-class ERM looks like today. It's integrated, it's scenario-driven, it's focused on decision cadence. Now let's look ahead. The Vendor Compass includes a forward-looking section called VC Sonar. What's the purpose of this section?
VC Sonar is designed to surface highly specialized technology providers. So these are vendors outside our core index of the 50 most influential that are adding high-fidelity signals and open integration paths to the IRM ecosystem. They're not full ERM suites, they are signal providers.
So they're the enablers that help programs move up the maturity curve toward autonomous IRM.
Precisely. They help programs move from the extended stage toward autonomous, where manual synthesis is replaced by automated triggers.
It sounds like they provide the missing ingredients to make ERM truly continuous. Let's touch on the categories, starting with enablers for board risk oversight.
For board risk oversight, the focus is on accelerating the time to executive awareness. A vendor like Datamender is an example. It provides real-time event intelligence, detecting breaking risk signals from public data and routing alerts immediately into executive workflows. Another example is Domo, an executive analytics platform. It can take your KRIs and convert them into threshold-based exception detection. This shifts board reporting from a static snapshot, here's where we were last quarter, to continuous monitoring, alert. A material threshold was breached 48 hours ago.
And for corporate governance?
There we see vendors making corporate records more machine-readable and audit-friendly. Athenian is one focused on entity management. It makes your corporate structure and compliance obligations routable via APIs. We also see providers like SIARI, which specializes in corporate ownership intelligence for continuous monitoring of your risk profile.
What about for strategic and emerging risk?
This is all about sensing external shifts. So you have FiscalNote, a policy and regulatory intelligence platform. It uses real-time regulatory signals to trigger scenario refreshes. And then there's Factal, which provides verified, real-time incident intelligence with geolocation context, so you're acting on verified, not speculative information.
And finally, enterprise legal risk. How do these emerging tools help here?
This is where we see legal documents moving from static data to measurable triggers. Ironclad, a contract lifecycle management platform, turns things like clause deviations or renewal windows into signals that activate risk workflows. Similarly, LinkSquares focuses on contract analytics, operationalizing critical contract terms as measurable signals that can be integrated into your workflows.
So if we connect the dots on VC Sonar, these providers are really a preview of how board-grade ERM is going to evolve.
That's right. It's about dashboards shifting from backward-looking reports to forward-looking, threshold-driven exceptions. It's about accelerating decision cycles while simultaneously improving defensibility through traceable, verified artifacts. The movement to autonomous IRM is the systematic replacement of manual work with high-fidelity, machine-readable signals.
Okay, so after all of this detailed analysis, what does it all mean for the executive who needs to take action now? Let's give our listeners a practical 4-step playbook for using this Vendor Compass research.
This needs to be a practical approach for any leader planning or reassessing their ERM roadmap. Step 1. Confirm the ERM program goal and the board decision use cases. You have to reframe ERM as a decision architecture, not a documentation exercise. Before you even look at platforms, isolate the critical decisions the board struggles to make without timely risk data.
And then make sure your appetite statements are actually usable.
You have to confirm they can be unambiguously translated into measurable, actionable triggers. If your appetite statement is just a qualitative concept, your platform will fail to operationalize it, no matter which vendor you choose. Start with the decision, not the risk list.
Okay, so once an executive understands their decision gaps, how do they translate that into prioritizing platform features?
That's step 2. Map your current state gaps to the 4 ERM solution areas. You need a rapid, honest self-assessment. Prioritize your vendor shortlisting based on where your biggest gaps are. Is it board risk oversight? Because your board packs lack evidence. Is it corporate governance, where accountability is diffuse? Do you need better strategic and emerging risk sensing? Or is there a huge gap in enterprise legal risk? Your priority gap defines which vendor capability you need to focus on.
Which leads directly to the platform selection strategy itself. What guidance do you have for choosing the right tier, integrator, accelerator, or pace setter?
Step 3 is to choose a tier strategy based on your integration needs and your operating maturity. We strongly advise that large enterprises, especially those at extended maturity with existing investments in ORM and TRM, should favor the integrators for their proven scale and integration.
And for SMEs?
SMEs should leverage accelerators for breadth or pace setters for targeted, fast-value needs. But regardless of your size, the critical architectural discipline is this. You must ensure your choice supports a clear, open path for future integration with the rest of your IRM ecosystem. The goal is unifying evidence, not building another silo.
And once that strategic choice is made, what's the ultimate pressure test for vendors during the selection process?
Step 4 is to validate with proof points. That means integration evidence, workflow adoption, and measurable outcomes. Do not accept marketing claims of integration potential. Demand cross-domain integration proof demonstrated through your use cases.
So make them show you. Don't just take their word for it.
Exactly. Require the vendor to show evidence reuse. Not just that they can pull data, but that they can process and display traceable handoffs from ORM, TRM, and GRC into the ERM board packs and appetite monitoring systems. And finally, your metric for success has to be based on decision cadence. Agree on and measure success by a quantifiable reduction in the time it takes to reach a strategic decision and the time it takes to gather the supporting evidence. If the new platform doesn't make your decisions faster and more defensible, the investment is not paying off.
We have been diving deep into the 2025 IRM Navigator Vendor Compass for Enterprise Risk Management, analyzing the new demands for decision quality and evidence reuse in the strategic risk technology market. To reiterate our conclusion, ERM's strategic role in 2025 is to function as the enterprise decision layer. This layer has to translate risk appetite, dynamic scenarios, and critical cross-domain signals into board-grade decisions that advance performance while sustaining assurance and defensibility. This demands that risk leaders institutionalize decision cadence and unify evidence from their operational and technology domains immediately. We encourage you to use the Vendor Compass framework to benchmark your current ERM program and accelerate your strategic road mapping. To access the full ERM Vendor Compass report, visit wheelhouseadvisors.com.
The path to integrated risk excellence begins with anchoring ERM firmly at the goals integration point. But remember this, the ultimate enduring test of ERM maturity is whether it has measurably reduced the time to decision and the time to evidence across the entire integrated risk ecosystem. That is the new measure of value.
That wraps up another episode of the Risk Wheelhouse. Thank you for spending time with us at Wheelhouse Advisors today. We hope you found the conversation insightful and actionable for your organization's risk strategies. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon Music. If you're looking for more in-depth analysis and thought leadership on risk technology, be sure to visit the Risk Tech Journal at therisktechjournal.com. It's your go-to source for comprehensive articles, expert interviews, and the latest trends shaping the industry. Subscribe today to stay informed. For any inquiries or feedback, please contact us directly at info@wheelhouseadvisors.com, or feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn and x.com and share your thoughts or suggestions for future topics. Visit wheelhouseadvisors.com for more information and resources. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, navigate wisely.